This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're in our Capitol Bureau today in Sacramento. We are joined by Das Williams, member of the California State Assembly, also a candidate for the Board of Supervisors in Santa Barbara County. And sir, a couple of years ago, I live in the Los Angeles area. A friend of ours' daughter, a bit rebellious, 16 years old, she ran away from home. Kids do that. We expected she'd be back a day or two later. We later found out that she had been kidnapped, put into a sex trafficking ring, and was gone for 3 months. It's a miracle she came back, but it was a 3-month hell.
And unfortunately, it's not an isolated case. We are looking at the modern advent of slavery, plague of slavery in our own communities. And many of us have the false assumption, even though much of it comes from cross-border crime and cross-border criminal rings, not all of it, and many of it is much of it is happening in our own communities, and with kids that grow up in these communities.
What's remarkable to me is how many victims are domestic. I mean, you said, of course, some of it's cross-border, but a very significant number is not.
We know of dozens of cases in Santa Barbara and Ventura County of this being local kids. And the really despicable thing is that many of these are being targeted for their particular level of vulnerability.
And I want to talk about that in a moment, but I also want to mention, I understand part of the challenge with regard to Santa Barbara, Ventura, Los Angeles, Orange County. What you see I'm doing is I'm going south because right through those counties is a freeway. And it's a freeway that takes you all the way up the state into Oregon, into Washington. And so a lot of these kids are being trafficked right along that 1 PCH or 5101, whatever it may be. I mean, that's the problem with these coastal counties.
That's right. They're being recruited from places of vulnerability, like homeless shelters, like the shelters for domestic violence victims, or foster youth.
And let's talk about that, because that is your focus.
Absolutely.
Explain exactly what is happening, because it is particularly sinister.
The fact is that many of the youth that are in these kinds of situations, they are adrift. They're looking for something, and they don't necessarily have a parent involved in their lives, and so a trafficker goes after them. A trafficker recruits them and then says that they will get additional bonuses if they recruit somebody else, sometimes even younger children.
And I have learned, sir, that a lot of this recruitment, and you said it, it's happening at these locations where the kids are most vulnerable. And some of these traffickers are literally standing outside the doors of these foster facilities or homeless shelters. They're prey. I mean, they're literally acting as predators, and their prey is walking out at their most vulnerable moment.
That's right. And these things involve a lot of mental manipulation, sometimes kidnapping, often enough drugs that someone cannot make a choice for their own. And obviously, anyone who's preying upon children is not preying upon people that can make those choices for themselves, especially if they are drugged, cut off from their parents, and kidnapped.
So a few years ago, California did take a bold move. The voters passed Prop 35, known as the Californians Against Sexual Exploitation Initiative, passed with overwhelming support, 81%, and that did increase penalties for those convicted of sex trafficking. No doubt important, and passed at a time when California was in a tricky situation with regard to its burgeoning, or I should say, expanding prison population. But you're looking to take Prop 35 to another level.
That's right.
Tell me what you're looking to do.
First of all, I want to say I'm really proud of our community for rallying around Prop 35. There was a lot of activism in our local churches and elsewhere in the community to support victims of sex trafficking and to get tougher on these crimes. I come from the viewpoint that it's good that we are in an age that we are reevaluating the lock 'em up mentality of the 90s in regards especially to people who are addicted to drugs or
Right.
other things. But look, there are crimes that we still need to be tough on.
But let me ask you,
and this makes sense to be one of them that is particularly called out.
So what are you looking to do? Because you do have some very specific language. It's your bill, AB 2513.
This bill, while it protects judicial discretion, it allows judges to use as an aggravating factor to add years onto the sentence whether the trafficker was targeting
Right.
these particularly vulnerable populations, whether they're going after girls or boys that are homeless, that are foster youth, that are victims of domestic violence, or even more disgusting, going after people who are recovering in a shelter for victims of sex trafficking, previous sex trafficking.
And are the victims, do they need to be minors, or would it be any age?
It would be any age. And this is, obviously, it's not just minors. With domestic violence victims, this is particularly the case. And look, some foster youth are not minors anymore.
There's programs.
There is a especially difficult phase for foster youth after they are aged out foster youth. They may not qualify for the same kind of housing that they did when they were a minor. And this is when many of them are snatched up. They either end up on the streets or in other trouble, or sometimes victims of sex trafficking.
Because you're looking to amend Prop 35, do you need to go back to the voters, or can this pass through the legislature?
No, because it does not contradict anything in Prop 35. If I was trying to weaken Prop 35, it would have to go back to the voters. But because it is additive, it is enhancing it, then it can be passed by the legislature.
So the governor has been a bit queasy over the last few years as it relates to creating new crimes or enhanced crimes that add prison time. Why? As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled about 5 years ago that our state prisons were meting out punishment cruel and unusual because of overcrowding. AB 109 hit. We were sending lower level of offenders down to the county jails. And so he's been vetoing a lot of these pieces of legislation. Now, in November 2014, the voters passed Prop 47, which reclassified certain crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, which may have eased the pressure on our prison and jail population. So is there room now, given that maybe our prison populations are decreasing and jail populations, for new enhancements?
Look, I understand the governor is under a lot of pressure. He does not want the courts to mandate releases that do not have criteria that make sense. And so he is trying various measures to make sense of the requirement to reduce our prison population. We cannot let the pendulum swing too far the other way. In the 90s, it swung too far into the lock 'em up mentality. It is now swinging too far into leniency. We still need to protect our communities, and particularly from heinous crimes like human trafficking, slavery in our own communities. So we should not be lenient on that.
Are the sentences in 35 not great enough?
They have not been in terms of providing a sufficient deterrent for targeting.
I understand.
And I think the real question is, do we preserve judicial discretion? Back in the 90s, when I was against mandatory sentencing acts, the battle cry we use is preserve the ability of a judge to make the call in the moment. We are still asking for that. Now, the pendulum has swung the other way. We're forcing judges to do lighter sentences. I believe we still need to let the judge make that call.
His name is Das Williams. My name is Brad Pomerance in Sacramento. It's Local Edition.